Hey, this is Sharon Raji Maynard, and this is my new podcast, Gazelles and the Phoenix. So why gazelles and phoenix? Well, there's an old quote that says, I'm going to stop focusing on the dinosaurs. Just let them die. Instead, I'm going to focus on the gazelles. Gazelles are those individual projects and organizations and individuals that are rising up out of the ashes, even before the dinosaurs are gone. So I have had the wonderful experience of meeting a lot of gazelles, being in company of those who are holding space as the phoenix rise from the ashes. So this podcast will be episodes to share with you those individuals, those groups, those ideas. Some of them will come from monthly meetings that are sponsored by the patrons of my other podcast, A Mystic's View. If you're interested in becoming part of that supportive community, go over to patreon.com/A Mystic's View. And there you can get details. We're a growing community. We're committed to a collaborative mindset, and it's a joyful experience. So thank you for those patrons that enable me to do this podcast. And I'm excited to share with you gazelles that are rising up like phoenixes from the ashes. Hi, everyone. This is Sharon Raji Maynard, and this is our series called The Deep Roots. And it's conversations with women who are doing extraordinary things, who have just taken an idea and done something about it. And this series is made possible by those who are supporting me on the Patreon platform. So thank you, Patreon sponsors. It's a Patreon enabled conversation. And every month we invite a woman, or I invite a woman to come and share, because it's in the sharing that we make deeper connections, those roots that hold us and keep us steady. So this month I have with me Teresa Bain, who has been a preschool owner, teacher, of course, and done some amazing things in behalf of our children. And in the times we're living right now, and we're recording this during what we're calling the pandemic. For some, it's a personal retreat, research what's going on in your life, really. And for others, it's a very difficult time. It's not only important to understand that our children are incredibly valuable to a society that can grow into a wonderful place we want it to be. How our children are treated and taught is important. But it's also important with this conversation to look at the women around the world, in our country, in your family, in your community, because they have dreams and visions and ideas that will make for a better world. And so let's keep that in mind as we go through our conversation today. So I'm really thrilled to have with me today Teresa, who has been a preschool owner for I don't know how long. She can tell us that. It's something that she, as a young child, started thinking and creating, teaching little kids on her street and in her family. And in the spirit of transparency, I have to tell you this, that I am her mother, which chokes me up a bit because I love her a lot, as mothers do. We love our daughters. So I can tell you she's been a teacher as long as I've known her. So Teresa, welcome to our Deep Roots series. And I want you to just have a time to let people know who you are. So begin by talking to us about you as a person, a woman, What does what do we need to know about you?
Thank you. Mom, I am your daughter, full transparency. I was thinking about what maybe to share related to teaching. And, who I am as a person is such a broad question that I think for me, focusing in on the teaching part of it may be a place to start. And I don't recall a time that I didn't love school or teaching. I remember even as a young child, during summertime, gathering my siblings and neighbor kids together to play school, and I would create little worksheets for them to do. And I don't know, the only thing I can imagine is I just came in with it. I don't recall a time that I didn't want to be a teacher. My first time going into school was at kindergarten. They didn't have preschool back at the time. And I don't remember a lot of my teachers throughout my years of school, but I do remember my kindergarten teacher. Her name was Mrs. Allred in Fairview, Utah. And I remember how I felt. It was my first time being away from my parents. And I remember feeling safe in her classroom. I remember feeling like I belonged there. I remember feeling curious, and I remember feeling like a gentleness in the classroom. And I think the only thing I can imagine is that first experience for me really cemented how I wanted how I wanted my students to feel in their classrooms. So looking back now, I can wonder why maybe I didn't consider other types of careers or other types of life paths, but that was just one that was inside of me that I never, ever questioned. I'm also a parent, I'm a wife, I'm a daughter, so I belong to those kind of other roles and responsibilities. But I think one thing that has been constant for me is just this real passion about and importance of the role that teachers play in communities.
It's interesting to hear, this passion that you didn't question. That's interesting that you didn't question. I think there are some women, and maybe men too, who have a passion, but they question whether that passion is something that would be practical. Maybe that's kind of the word a lot of people use. But how will I be supported? And that wasn't something that you even questioned. And I think it might have to do with the fact that growing up in the age that you grew up, at least teacher was a profession that women could do, and so having that passion to teach, there wasn't social constructs around that says you can't, which is really is a value, because you didn't have to hit the walls, at least that wall that says you can't because you're a woman. I mean, that's not even practical.
Yes, I think that I'm a product of society. And so as much as I like to imagine that I have complete free will, the truth is that I am a product of my society and what the world has told me I can or can't do, or what is or is not possible for somebody who looks like me. And so I'm sure that, there may have been other curiosities that I had, that if as a young girl I was given different messages, I may have explored further. It's very possible that would be the case. I did consider being a social worker. That was the other, that was the only time that I thought, do I want to teach or do I want to work with children in that way? And I personally just didn't feel like I could separate myself well enough to leave the work that is involved, that can be involved in working with children in very difficult and vulnerable situations. I didn't know that I could leave that at the office, so to speak, and not bring all of that home with me. And so that was one time when I did consider a different path, but I just didn't think that I personally could separate well enough to leave whatever difficulties or traumas, in the office. Yeah. And I also want to recognize that being able to follow my passion and being able to do what I really feel called to do is not something that everybody can do. That for many, many people, they have passions and they know their passions and they know what is exciting to them and what they feel called to do. And they don't have the opportunities that I had. And so I want to just recognize that it's not just as simple as knowing what your passion is and going for it. That I had opportunities. It was quite easy for me to get into college, pay for college. I used grants and student loans, and I did have to do it that way, but there was a path open to me and there was experiences open to me that are not open to everybody. So I know that there are, just like me, there is a person out there who wants to teach and would love to teach, and their life circumstances or opportunities isn't allowing that to happen. So, I just want to recognize that as well.
I think and absolutely, that's very true. And I think one of the awareness pieces that I know I'm deepening with, and I'm hearing it in conversations with other women, is the recognition that those who have had an easier door opening in their life want to hold maybe a new vision, if you will, to say we're going to be the future and hold that pillar to begin to demand ways for doors to open for those who right now feel they have no doors. Instead of saying, I have a door, so sorry you don't have a door.
Right.
That we who have had that experience can hold it and anchor it, but we can call for doors to be opened for dreams and for ideas, even though, how do we crumble what's in the way of it is part of that door holding.
Yes.
So absolutely. Yeah. Seeing the bigger picture as we are today,
Right.
It's a very different world than when you got into college and followed that stream. So let's go back and say the dream was, the passion, it was so fun. I would imagine it was really quite fun being the teacher when you were making sitting the chairs up in the driveway and in the garage and making, calling the kids to play at school. Do you remember how that felt?
Yes, I remember how it felt. I loved it. I even remember taking my younger brother on walks to the neighborhood candy store and would kind of do math drills with him on the way. He was, I think, maybe 3 to 5, maybe. And so they were more like story problems. Like if you had 3 dogs and a neighbor wanted to give you 2 dogs, how many dogs would you have? So, I remember those kind of walks where we were practicing math skills along the way. So I loved it. I don't know how it felt for the students, my siblings, if it felt like I was being bossy or such, but I just really loved it. And it felt like play. It felt fun, and it felt like really a great way to spend summers and afternoons.
Yeah. And so of course, whenever there's an idea, in order to take it from that fun thing that of a child, you have to have action steps. So when was it you decided, how old were you, and what to get into making it happen?
Well, the teaching career that I have is not the teaching career that I thought I would have. The teaching career I thought I would have was that I would be a public school teacher in a public school district, that I would be teaching somewhere between kindergarten and sixth grade. So the only way for me to do that was to go to college. And so that was the first step, was to go to college. And so in high school, that meant that school mattered to me and that my grades mattered to me. I didn't have, like you went to college for a little while, and I don't believe Dad graduated from college. So I would have been the first person in our kind of nuclear family, or that first generation, to go to college. So that was the first step, was to get a college degree saying that I was qualified to teach kids kindergarten through eighth grade. And so that's what I did. That was the first step. And then it was a matter of, once I had the degree, getting a certificate within the state, substitute teaching, trying to find a job. So all of those things were action steps that had, that was work that I needed to put in.
And I'll have to say, you figured that out with whatever resources you pulled together. And which is also a good point, that sometimes we know how to take the steps. To be a teacher, that was pretty clear. If you were going to be a teacher in a school district, you had to do step one. There they were, right there before you. Some who want to be whatever their dream is don't even know what the steps are, right? And that's part of for some, like, do I dare even voice that this is what I'm going to be doing, because I don't know how to do it. And that is also sometimes the block. I don't know how to make it happen. And to be able to say, I'm going for it anyway, and let the steps show up. That's two different methods, right? So, but nobody was there to say, basically, okay, Teresa, this is what you have to do. But at least you could, in your network of resource people, they knew how to help you know what to do and get into college and graduate, get your certificate, put in the work that's required, because you had to do that. So then,
but I do want to say that I've kind of shrunk that time period. But when I graduated, and we had been told, oh, don't worry, there's lots of jobs available for teachers. There'll be lots of jobs available for teachers. Well, there wasn't when I graduated. And so I ended up leaving the state that I graduated from and moved to a different state because there was more job opportunities. And then the substitute teaching, I did that for many years. I substituted in many different districts, many different ages, to try and get a job. And when a job didn't come available for me, I did other jobs. I worked as a receptionist. I worked as, I don't even remember all the things I did, but the bills still needed to be paid. So it wasn't, for me anyway, it wasn't just a really easy, direct path that, it was years before I actually was hired as a kindergarten teacher. And it was a result of first substituting quite a bit in that school district, and then was hired as a kindergarten teacher.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and those are important things, because I know when we're young, probably maybe till we're 30, maybe we could start recognizing it by 22, that doors aren't always going to be opening for us all along the way. And so you have to do what you have to do to keep food on the table and a roof over your head. And then you're hired. Now you're finally hired. Now you get into the public school as a kindergarten teacher, right back a Mrs. Allred for others.
Yes.
Now you get to say, is my classroom, am I going to be able to be that gentle, safe, I love you, embracing for my kindergarten kids? How was that for you?
I was hired to teach two classes. So it was a morning and an afternoon class. At that time, kindergarten was there was a half day kindergarten. So I had a group come in the morning and a group come in the afternoon. And I was thrilled to finally have my own classroom. I had been gathering ideas from all of the other classrooms that I had seen, things that I liked, things that I didn't like. And so I was thrilled to be able to put things on the walls and develop a curriculum and come up with, classroom management strategies. I also was, learned some things. I was amazed that I had kids coming into kindergarten who were reading at a third grade level, and I had kids coming into kindergarten who couldn't identify colors and shapes. And so I was really surprised at the wide variety of at least academic knowledge that kids were coming in with. And I loved being a part of a teaching team. I loved sharing ideas with other kindergarten teachers. And even though as a teacher, you're spending a lot of your time alone with your students, it was nice to be a part of have peers that you could share ideas and bounce ideas off of. So there wasn't anything about being a kindergarten teacher that I didn't really, really love.
I think one of and it might be a myth, so you can correct me if it is, it seems to me that in our conversations today, in our world today, not just with the pandemic, but before that, there is a lot expected of teachers to make things right. Like you were saying, here these kids are coming in. Some kids can't do shapes and colors yet, and some are reading at third grade level. What about, I don't know if you had kids, some of them hadn't had breakfast because they didn't have food, and others had plenty of food and fancy clothes. I mean, there's a huge disparity that teachers see in a district that most don't see. And yet I think there's an expectation that teachers somehow, maybe because we think they're the teachers, they're the ones to fix it. Is that anywhere accurate?
I think that, I think that the demands placed on teachers is incredible. It has increased since I left the public school field, years ago when I began doing my own school. I think that it's increased quite a bit since then. I remember when I was substitute teaching, I would substitute in a district that was out in the countryside. So I'd have to drive past cow pastures and farms to get to the students that were out in the rural areas. And maybe then the next day I would be in the downtown city area. I substituted in a school that served families that were without homes and children that were going to school that did not have homes. And for me, that was also a real learning experience to see some really strong anger and emotion in really young children because of life circumstances that they had no control of. I went into classrooms where there wasn't art supplies. Can you hear Nikki? Hi, that's Nikki. Oh,
yeah, hi, Nikki. We're just we'll open up for conversations in a bit, but glad you're here. Okay. Yeah. So the discrepancies.
So the discrepancies where there was that if there were supplies that were going to be in a classroom, it was a lot of the responsibility of the teacher to bring those into the classroom. So it is, the teachers are the front line of a lot of that. Teachers are the front line of maybe noticing if there's support that children need that they're not getting at home, or if the resources around, like you said, nutrition. So, I think teachers are, it makes me emotional to think of it, but I think teachers are just the heroes in their communities. And maybe a silver lining of this pandemic is that more people can see and understand that.
I think that's really important to really highlight, is that what we are being given the opportunity to see, I guess, again, in this pandemic time, is what has worked, what hasn't worked. And the value that teachers bring isn't just because they have a classroom, but they have eyes on things, and are they ever brought into creating true solutions? I think not, but it's possible. Wouldn't that be amazing? So, here you are, you put in your time, and you're in your own school. And what's interesting, I think I want to also highlight that ability to work in collaboration with others who have similar goals, that team, like the team of kindergarten teachers. But there's something about that collaborativeness that expands what one person is able to do, that isn't unique to you as a teacher. And so I want to really highlight that. I think that's something very important to look at. So now, what was it that took you from being a preschool teacher in a district, having your own classroom, your team, working together? When and how did it happen that you moved in and did your own preschool? What was that about?
Well, it was that I found something that I loved more than teaching. And the thing that I found that I loved more than teaching was my daughters. And I had one daughter at the time and became pregnant with our second child. And I found that I wanted to spend time with them more than I wanted to be in the classroom. And so I left the classroom and worked for probably 10 years as a in-home childcare provider, and so that I could be home with them. And I tried to do preschool during that time, and it was very difficult because childcare providers are putting in incredibly long hours. 5 a.m. to 7 p.m. is not unusual. You're working with, infants to school-age children. So I tried to keep the seed of that teaching going, but it wasn't until about 10 years later, when my daughters were older, that I returned to the teaching only. And that's when I opened my own preschool and did that for, I want to say, 13 to 15 years. And that was one of the greatest blessings of my life.
Tell us about the first year. What was that first year, that first classroom? How did that come together?
Well, the first year I actually did childcare and preschool because I had leased space in a local church. And I had, I think, 2 enrolled preschool students. And I had, I think, maybe 2 of my daycare kids that were old enough. So I had hired someone to help with the daycare so that for a brief period of time, not brief, but for like a 3 or 4 hour period of time during the day, I could take the 2 childcare kids down to the preschool with me, where we would meet up with the 2 preschool only kids. So I think I had a group of like maybe 4 kids for the first year. And it was, I really appreciated those initial parents who put their trust in me. I was a new business. There was nobody that they could call to say, like, does this person know what she's doing in terms of our children? So they trusted me and really helped plant that little seed. So that first year was very small, and it was doing both jobs. And then I let go of doing the childcare. And the second year I was able to do preschool only. And it was a lot of work. It's a lot of work to own your own business. You have to wear many hats: the hat of the teacher, the hat of the boss if you're working with other teachers, the hat of the administrator, the hat of the public relations person. So, I really want to, say that it is a lot of work, and that I don't know that I would have been brave enough to maybe try it if I hadn't had Noel, my husband, has been a really great partner in supporting those ideas. I'm more of an in-the-box kind of person, and he is more of a out-of-the-box kind of person. And so, as I said, hey, I'd want to open my own preschool, he was nothing but supportive in doing that. And it wasn't a business that made money for a while. It was really a hobby / a passion project.
Right. That takes me back to the fact, as we were talking, like even getting your teacher degree, that was, in the years you were growing up, being a woman, you could be a teacher. Of course, there was a path for doing it. Of course, there were options to do it. It was a little bit easier. But then again, you talk about that voice, whatever the voice is. And for you, it was your husband that says, well, go for it. Well, then do it. And be supportive in that. And I think that's also something that we can do for one another, whether it's mother to daughter, sister to sister, friend to friend. Like, okay, you want to do that? Great. I'm holding that vision for you to help pull to you what you need. Because if you don't put your foot on the path, there's no doors. You just keep saying, well, I wish I would, or I'd like to, right?
Right.
So you developed, because you were the one, and you are a systems person, I know that part. You developed a system, really, from scratch, from your experience and for what you want to accomplish. And what would you say, you talked about Mrs. Allred and how in her class, you felt safe, you felt like you belonged, you felt curious, there was a gentleness about it. Did you have a sense of what was the environment like that you wanted to create for your preschool? Or did that come along, and what was it?
Some of it remained constant and some of it changed. What I wanted to do was I felt like, because I knew where they were going in terms of kindergarten, I wanted to continue to provide experiences and learning that would enable them to be as, quote unquote, prepared for kindergarten as possible. So I wasn't just a play-based preschool. There are some that are play-based preschools, and they have wonderful value, and families choose those. I wanted to combine play, exploration, and academics. So my focus was on both of those things. So we had times where kids were just free exploring, playing with blocks and cars and art area and dramatic play area. And we also had time where students were doing academic work, and which would be age appropriate for, 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. The thing that changed for me, I believe, was how we did the academics. I believe I started out being more maybe workshop and paper-based, and kind of let go of more of that as the years went by. And as I began to see that learning just happens all around you. And so you don't necessarily need pen and paper for learning to happen. And I also really wanted to respect that I believe children come in whole and complete beings. They don't become that, they are that. And so to treat each of them as if they do know their own mind, they do know their own, the things that they like, the things that they don't like. and that there's not a right or wrong, pass or fail. We had students that came in excited about letters and wanted to write them. And we had kids that were nearing graduation that preferred to play with building blocks and run outside. And both of those are children who are successful and wonderful. And we did do assessments at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year, but those were meant to be like snapshots of what your child is, what we're seeing at preschool, or the things that they are showing us that they can understand. It was never meant to be your child is, passing kindergarten or preschool, or failing in preschool, because just like adults, we all have, there are things that I'm really, really good at, and there are things, or that I'm really, really interested in, and there are things that are harder for me or that I'm not interested in. And that is the same for children.
I remember having a conversation around this. Children are coming whole. Mm-hmm. And they also, you start to see some of their excitements and their gifts, if you will, when they're little. And I remember a conversation, especially with one of the young girls, and we thought, here she is at age 4, but if she were in a 30-year-old body, she would be a politician. I mean, she had that kind of vibe, And so it felt really weird in a 3-year-old, but it wasn't about squashing that vibe. It was about helping her. I think the tack we took was to help her be able to listen to others rather than, dictate down. But it's like seeing what you're seeing emerging in this little body, and not squashing it or denigrating it, but helping it become something that's they're matured into. And I really valued that in the classroom. So, we're going to talk for just about maybe 5 more minutes, then we're going to open it up. So get ready, those of you who might have questions. What did you learn from those kids?
That's the thing. I feel emotional again, because I feel like really they taught me. And that wasn't something that I was necessarily expecting. I learned from them, over and over again. I saw how children can be so compassionate, how they can be so accepting, how they can be so in the moment. And I think being in the moment is something we lose as adults. Children can dig for hours looking for worms, and the excitement of finding a worm and passing it around all these little muddy hands. I think just some of the simple things about learning, and how we can how curiosity doesn't need to end. Being curious about things. So I feel like, in a way, I owe them a debt of gratitude, because I feel like I learned from them more than they learned from me. Hopefully, though, they remember how they felt in the classroom. That's what I hope. Not that they say, oh, Teacher Teresa taught me how to make my A's, but I hope that they can remember how they felt when they were in our school. And, I want to say that I did this in a community. I talk about like the support of Noel. I talk about, but I also worked with other amazing teachers that brought their gifts to the school, and that I trusted 100% with these children. It isn't something that I created on my own. I was very fortunate to be supported by others who love and believe in children.
I think that another takeaway I'd like to point out, from this conversation is that what the person at the top, even though we're doing power with, and we're teaming and collaborating, nevertheless, there is someone who is holding the vision. And the vision that you held consistently was how children were treated, that they were absolutely safe in your care, that there was respect engendered, not only amongst the kids, but amongst the team, the collaborative team. And I think that's important for anyone who is thinking about what is my dream and where's it going to take me? Being able to say, my dream has qualities. I'm contributing something to, in this case, children. And I don't have to contribute everything, but what I want to contribute is. And you stayed very clear with what that was. I think there was one time that a teacher was hired that didn't last very long. And there was nothing wrong with what she was. She just wasn't a fit in what you were holding for the environment and quality of, and the school. We haven't even said Apple Preschool, and so you were very, I think, tenacious in holding the experience that you wanted for the children. You were very tenacious and hardworking in making sure it was a rich environment. It wasn't just come and play and we'll talk once in a while about colors. It's very rich. So, having a dream, having a vision of what you might want to do takes physical work and it takes inner strength. And those kids kept bringing that and making it stronger. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open the field, and anyone and each of you can kind of see each other. So if there's anything you want to say, just watch. You don't have to raise your hand. Just say, start talking. Everybody will give you the space. So if there's a question or a comment, I'm just unmuting everybody. So don't. And so if there's anything you want to say, just say who your name is, so everybody knows who you are, and comment for the next maybe 10 minutes.
Well, I'm Michelle, back here, and I just want to say, I'm Teresa's sister, and I've been in her preschool and volunteered there a couple of times, and I just want to say how inspired I was by what you were doing there, and you could tell that those, that the parents felt connected, the kids felt safe and well cared for and vibrant and excited, and I've seen other childcare type situations where it's dull, like there's no vibrancy, there's no there's no life. It's, they're clearly babysitting these kids for money. And, I wish I had a child to put into Apple Preschool, or I wish I was in Apple Preschool as because I do think it's incredibly important how kids are shaped from those very early experiences, and to be in an environment where they feel loved and stimulated and respected is a huge stepping stone for becoming, a balanced human being. And so I just, and I experienced that from you as a person outside of preschool as well. So you're really the same, you're really bringing in your values by just being yourself and structuring that in a preschool. So I guess there's no question in that really, but but I know it wasn't always easy. It was particularly in the early days.
Well, and one of the things, thank you.
You're welcome.
One of the things that I guess, weighs on me is that I feel that every parent wants their child, like there isn't a parent who doesn't want the very best for their child. There isn't a parent who doesn't want their child to have rich, wonderful learning experiences and caregivers who are, kind and engaged. And I had a private preschool where parents had to have the resources to pay me, and they had to have a parent who could bring their children or a grandparent or be a part of some kind of community. And, what weighs on me is that that's not available to all children, that there is not a way for all parents that want it to have spaces like that for their children. It is not because parents don't want it. It's because it's not something that we value enough in society to make it happen. So I would imagine if I was, I just wanted to say that I recognize, that because I was a private school, that although I tried to make my prices very affordable, that I was pulling families that had the ability to do that, and that not all families, not because they don't want it, but because they just simply can't, could have an environment like that. Yeah.
Very good point. The social will, the political will to create that type of a network of systems and support. And especially, when you were growing up, you pointed out, you didn't go to preschool because back then women were in the home and we didn't need preschools. Now, most women have to work for a lot, and having a network of care, not only preschools, but daycares.
Yeah. It's very important.
It's really important, and it's really not been last few years a little bit more talk about it, but a great need in our society.
Yes, definitely.
Any other questions or comments? So, Teresa, here you are at this stage. You have a lot of supplies. You have lots of experience.
They're called teaching treasures.
Teaching treasures.
And I am paring them down. Even more, but that is the hazard of the job, is you just come up with teaching treasures.
Yes.
Good morning, Mike.
I haven't.
How are you?
Yeah. And they're still, and they call to me. They want to be out playing with children, and not all of them are. So I hear them calling to me.
Yeah. So I don't know. Let's maybe hold. One of the takeaways is holding that vision. I mean, there are groups out there holding vision of what will be after the pandemic, and holding that vision of a country, if not a world. Start with our country, start with our community, start with our state, in which there is incredible support, real support for the networks for supporting children. We say we are a country that values our children, and we haven't acted that way yet, but we could.
Well, I want to say that teachers are showing the amazing strength that they have. I mean, teachers are finding ways to connect with children. They are finding ways to continue to do the work, even in this pandemic. And my hope is that we can return to classrooms. I think that for young children, especially, being in a classroom and in a community with their peers is really important. But teachers are a creative lot, and they are a hardworking lot, and they are They put in the time and the hours that they are not paid for. And so, I can only hope that this pandemic has shed light on what teachers have already known about themselves, is that they are a very special group of people.
They are indeed. Indeed. Well, Teresa, thank you so much for being available. If anybody has questions about how to start their own preschool or what it takes, would you be open to having a contact with
Yes, absolutely. I'm happy to share anything that I've learned about starting a preschool, operating a preschool, how to let families know that you're in the community. Any of that, I'm happy to share. Learned at trial and error, and what worked for me may work for others, it may not, but I would be happy to pass any of that knowledge along to anyone who is interested in working with children. Yes.
Okay, great. Well, we'll put it out there and let it that information find its way to the next preschool daycare owners. Thank you so much. Thank you for all of you who are on the call. Love seeing faces.
Thank you very much.
Until next month, I don't know who we're going to be interviewing next month, but it will be, again, an extraordinary person, a woman doing some amazing things out in her world. So thanks, and come again. Blessings.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The podcast Gazelles and the Phoenix is brought to you by those who are sponsors of my Patreon community. Or share the podcasts. Definitely rate our podcast 5 stars, of course. And always look for us on Facebook. A Mystic's View and the Gazelle and the Phoenix is also found there. Subscribe, listen, and help us expand.